We're live. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, hello, hello. Is anybody live? Is anybody joining us right now? So we'll just start right now. So thank you so much for joining this very interesting, important live discussion. This is something that I believe you'll be able to learn something from. I'm going to start by introducing myself. So my name is BC, and I'm really passionate about discussing topics relating to disability or special needs. If you're here right now, please can you leave a comment and let me know where you're joining me from. Um, I want to believe that, let me see, just hope. All right, so I've set the privacy of these live discussion to public. I hope I did that so that anybody, even those that are not my friends on Facebook, will be able to watch these live discussion. Now, the reason why I decided not to broadcast this video within, you know, our close group is because I feel that this discussion needs to be heard by more people. This discussion is really, really important, and it's sort of discussion that I think we should be talking about from time to time. And it's not all the time that women are interested in just fashion or slaying or whatever and things like that. There are lots of important things that we actually need to also talk about. I mean, not just women, men and women, all of us. So I'm very passionate about discussing topics relating to disability, and I'm also a Christian. So it really makes a lot of sense that I should talk about the church and disability, knowing fully well that this has also affected me one way or the other. I'd love you to do me a favor if you're watching this right now. Can you please, because the topic of discussion is disability and the church. I think I should properly let those that are just meeting me for the first time, because even if you're Facebook friends, there's a possibility that you've never heard me talk before. So I really want you to be able to know, um, you know, who BC is. So to I'm a mom to two lovely, wonderful children called Joy and Joe. Hi, Maya. Thank you. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your support. So, I'm a mom to two wonderful children, Joy and Joseph, and they happen to have special needs. So all my parenting life has always been about special needs, and this naturally makes me super inquisitive about learning more about disability advocacy and all. Um, with this Facebook Live video, I'm hoping that you'll be able to learn a lot more about what you should look out for in a church that is inclusive. I would also share some of my experience. I think it all depends on time because I'm hoping that I won't go beyond 30, 35 minutes. I'm also hoping that you will also be able to learn a bit more about some of the misconceptions about disabilities in the church and how these can be corrected. So I'll be teaching about how some of these misconceptions can be corrected. Now, this particular live discussion is not a table shaking motive, but this is mainly for me to get some important things off my chest. Now, I mentioned that my two children have special needs. Now, my daughter is run about, well, approximately 11, so I would say 10 and a half. And right from when she was 1 year old, I can remember on a particular day, I was sitting in church and I was feeling so low because of, the attitude and all that, which I will go into in detail. And I can remember saying, telling my husband that I think I should tell the pastor that I would like to grab the microphone and talk to the people about disability. I certainly didn't have the courage at that time to talk about disability because we were also, my husband and I at the time as well, we were also just starting our journey in the world of special needs. And, we just, I just didn't have the courage at that time. You can imagine my daughter is around about 10 and a half now. It's taken me so long to decide that this has to be talked about. And it is not proper that within the church, some families with children with special needs or some families with members that have special needs have to be moved to tears because of the non-inclusiveness of their church. So it is not enough that we have to lock ourselves in the toilet to cry. We need to be able to speak out in our own little way. So I would really appreciate if you can share this video. I really appreciate you for joining. This is something that really, really matters to me. I'll certainly try my best not to, slice onions. So please. So I'm hoping lastly that at the end of this video, we can sort of like learn a bit more really about how we can make our churches a lot more disability friendly. And if there is time, I might be able to share some of the things I learned from a video Pastor Sunday Adelaja taught on disability and barrenness. That's a really, really relevant video, and I've learned a lot from that particular video. And if I have the time, I'll be able to do that towards the end of this video, or I might talk about that in another video. So let's see how it goes. Please participate in this discussion by sharing your own views. It doesn't matter if you don't have anybody in your family with a disability, even though I feel that one way or the other, each and every one of us might know someone who is disabled. Now, I'm really curious. Can you leave a comment and tell me how many, that's if you know, how many disabled people do you have in your church? How many disabled people do you have in your church? I mean, it doesn't have to be an exact number, an approximate number. How many disabled people do you see in your church? 50, 100, 5, 10, 2, 1, 0. I really want to know. I want you to leave a comment and tell me how many disabled people you think you have in your church. Young, old, middle age, anyone. I want to know how many disabled people have you noticed in your local church? That's the church you currently attend. Please leave a comment and write the number below. Tell me how many people in your church have special needs. So disability. Under the Equality Act 2010, you have a mental, if you have a mental or you have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term effect on your ability to do normal daily activity, you can be considered a disabled person. So that's the definition under the Equality Act. And I'm going to just, share a little bit about my experience. Before I do that, can I just quickly welcome some wonderful people that I've noticed have joined us. Hi, lovely Tutu. Thank you so much for making it, because I know you're very busy, so I really appreciate you for joining. Hi, Mary. Hello. Hello, SA. Hi. Hello. Hello, Shola. Hi. And okay, so I've said hello. I think I've said hello to everybody. So leave a comment so I can know that you've joined us, so I can properly welcome you. So my experience so far. When I was presented with my daughter's diagnosis on the day she was born, I attempted to do a mental prep in my head amidst all the crying and praying we did. I tried to, sorry, I'm just noticing a comment now. It's difficult to, sorry, I've just paused so I can read the comment. It's difficult to tell how many disabled persons are in my church, though, because it's not always visible. That's the point I want to make. How visible are they? Thank you for that comment. Thank you so much. And let me see what my lovely sister Shalai is saying. I don't go to church, but when I used to go, it was Catholic, and there was a sprinkling of kids, 1 or 2 adults. Thank you so much for your comment. So please just keep it coming. Please leave a comment and just tell me, if at all, if the number is 0, that's if you don't see any of them at all, leave a comment. I'll tell you the reason why I'm asking this question. So when I was presented with my daughter's diagnosis, just like I said, I tried to prepare for, sort of do a mental prep, because I love to be organized, sort of. And I tried to imagine what are the challenges that we are likely to face. Now, all sorts of things came on my mind, but the thing is, I never thought that we might face challenges in church. That was something I never prepared for. So obviously, I was in for a surprise. I was really, really in for a surprise. A little bit about my Christian journey. I was born into a family where my mom was a Christian. I'm using was because my mom is late and my dad is a Muslim. So I'm using is because my dad is still here. Praise God. So my dad is a Muslim. My mom was a Christian. So I was initially, up until the age of 10, exposed to both religions. I studied Arabic as a kid, and I also used to go to church with my mom. So it got to a point when I got into boarding house, I was able to make that decision that I wanted to be a Christian. And luckily for me, the boarding house I went to, someone preached to me. That was during the Scripture Union era, and I gave my life to Christ right there in the boarding house. Um, so that's a little bit about my Christian journey. And obviously, I was really young when I gave my life to Christ. So it's been a journey. There's been a couple of times I've had to rededicate my life to Christ. And that's it's been an amazing journey. So naturally, fast forward when I had my children, I also not because that's my mom passed the faith on to me as well because she's a Christian. So I naturally wanted my kids to also grow up in the church. So my kids were actually born in the church. Both of them were named and blessed by the pastor. So this is something my husband and I, really, really wanted. So as you can see, my husband and I, my family, we really, really love the Lord. So we really wanted our children to be a part of the church. We had no idea the sort of challenges that will, sort of like spiral. When I talk about the misconceptions about disability, you will get to understand why I said we have faced a lot of challenges, and many of them are still probably ongoing. Some are resolving, and I'm talking about challenges in the church. Let me see. Okay. So let's go straight into it. Misconceptions about disability in the church. These are some of the views that Christians sort of have about disability. Now, when I'm talking about disability in the church, misconceptions in church. Now, I'm not only referring to just the physical church, just the building. I'm talking about the body of Christ, the people. Now, to give you an idea of what I really mean by it's more of the people, Christians, the body of Christ. There was a particular time I was led, I was inspired I wanted to reach out to families like mine by sharing my birth stories, two birth stories, one for Joy, one for Joseph. I wanted other families in our circumstance to also understand that they are not alone. So I shared my birth story, how I gave birth to my daughter, what happened at that day, then my son. Now, the messages I got in my inbox, majority of them were things like, it is well. That's not a bad thing anyway, it is well. But the shocker for me was that more than half of the messages were actually recommending that I take my children for deliverance. Now, you might think that's not an issue, but I would encourage you to please stay tuned, and I'll explain to you some of the reasons why this is some sort of misconception. Actually, when you see disabled people and their family as magnets for some sort of deliverance and things like that, I will explain to you as time goes on. So the first point is that if we live long enough, we ourselves will encounter disability, injury, age, accident, or illness. Now, I want to be very honest in this discussion. Very, very honest. Okay? I want to be really, really honest in this discussion. I'm going to tell you that when some of you say things like this, if someone says everybody is likely to encounter disability at one point or the other in their life, whether through injury or age or accident, I know that my fellow Nigerian Christians will probably say, God forbid. Now, this is my personal philosophy in terms of disability. And that's the fact that even if you were not born with a disability, which Joy was born with a disability as my daughter. My son was born with a disability as a result of his premature birth. Now, even if you're not born with a disability, there is something called an acquired disability. So it's not everybody that has a disability that was born that way. Some people were actually born neurotypical, but they actually acquired their disability along the line, as a result of an accident or illness or injury or age. Now, age, I think, is something that a lot of us are not thinking about. A lot of us are not thinking about age. We're not realizing that at some point all the time, when you're older, I have interacted with a lot of elderly people. It's either hearing, they might start having impairments in their hearing. Some start having issues with their sight. These are people that have lived perfectly neurotypical lives. They didn't have a disability, but then they might not be prepared for the fact that at some point in their lives, they are going to encounter a disability. So our attitudes towards, and I've said it. I've actually said it, attitude. And you will understand why I'm talking about attitude is if we consider that disabled people are not aliens, they are like us, we'll understand that each and every one of us will probably experience disability as a result of age. So it's not supposed to be some sort of awkward, like this particular discussion, I'm sort of prepared that a lot of people might not be interested in something to do with disability because, it's some sort of, it feels like it's some sort of taboo or something, or, oh, I don't, it's not my portion, God forbid, I usually talk to my husband and say, I hope I wasn't like that before I had my children. You know, I I want to hope that I was just not that sort of person that would say, oh, not my portions for so why somebody else? Why does it have to be somebody else? But let's not go into that, okay? But I've mentioned that these are some of the areas that, anybody, it's no respecter of persons, can, encounter disability. Some Christians have flawed ideas on disability, such as seeing healing as a primary goal. If this resonates with you, leave me a comment. I get this a lot. Take your daughter to synagogue, uh, in Nigeria. Take your daughter to the healing school by Pastor Chris. All these things, have you actually asked that person if their main goal in life is to be healed? Have you actually asked that person, why do some Christians have this flawed idea about disabilities? So every church should have a disability ministry. I cannot overemphasize this, but hopefully before the end of my video, you would understand why. Another misconception is that people who are physically disabled are also mentally disabled. That's not true. There are lots and lots and lots of individuals who are maybe physically disabled and they're not mentally disabled. Even some physically disabled people, like some people who've acquired disability via an accident or something, they are perfectly mentally intact, just like you and I. There's no reason why you have to look down on them. Another point is there is this idea that people with disabilities cannot serve in the church. I have always said it that my daughter doesn't have to be as chatty as I am to be able to participate in a church, in a like the church nativity. I felt really proud when my daughter had a first nativity where she was Mary. I walked into the school hall and she was Mary. Joy was Mary. She sat in a chair in her wheelchair and she had baby Jesus. That was really fantastic. The other kids were a lot more active and mobile, were given other roles. That is what the church should be doing. People with disabilities, I've only used my daughter as an example, they can still serve in the church. Even adults, teenagers with disabilities, they can still serve in the church. They are not useless at all. Your church needs to be inclusive. And when I'm talking about inclusiveness, I'm not just talking about your building. You have the ramp and all that. There's so many things. My husband calls me a health and safety specialist because in a way, before the children get into some sort of trouble or the other, I can tell, oh, that place is a bit sloppy. the joy is likely to fall. That's a bit whatever, I'm already thinking ahead. So this is not just about health and safety. There's going to be a wheelchair ramp, the topography of the car park has to be safe enough for people with disabilities to be able to maneuver and things like that. That's not just it. The major number one thing I want us to think about is our attitude and biblical teaching. When I'm talking about biblical teaching, I'm sure you all hear times when a pastor will say, can we all stand up for our prayers? Not everybody can stand up. Some people cannot stand. Some people cannot stand. My daughter cannot stand, and she still wants to be a part of the church. So we need to change. We need to be inclusive in our attitude as well. Another misconception is that people with disabilities are needy. No, they're not. They are not. People with disabilities are not needy. This is a complete misconception. Another misconception is that disability is caused by a sin or a curse. That is very, very common with my Naija people. I hail, I hail you. It's so common. There's this thing that you must have done something wrong, or you must have. In fact, when I had my daughter, because obviously she's my first, so I kind of always remember that first before I then think about Joseph. Can remember doing some sort of CV in front of God and saying, I served for so number of years. I used to serve in the car park. I also used to serve in the choir. I would walk miles to be able to get to choir rehearsals. I reminded him about everything. That's all just self-righteousness. Disability is no respecter of persons. It's not about how intelligent you are or how amazing you are or how holy you are. It can happen to just anybody. People who are disabled, they have not caused their disability as a result of sin or a curse. In fact, people who are born with a disability, they've not even reached the stage of sinning. So I usually say this, and it might sound funny, but that's the reality. A disability at birth is almost like winning a lottery. It's almost as if you're winning a lottery. It's almost as if you're winning a lottery. But in actual fact, if you win a lottery, you'll be all over, hey, I won a lottery. But it's only when we have something that might be perceived as negative, that's when we think, why me, and things like that. Please, a disability is not cursed by a sin or a curse. It is not. It is not. I have had all sorts of things thrown at me. All sorts and all sorts and all sorts of things. I don't cry over them anymore. From someone ringing me and saying, you have to go for deliverance. You have to go. Affliction will not rise the second time. When you talk like that, you are trying to say that people with disabilities were created by a God who made an error. God does not make mistakes. God does not make errors. God is a good God. We're so obsessed with perfection. I mean, you see it in magazines around us and things like that. People even say that people will so-called look physically beautiful. They get a lot more opportunities in life than people. So you can imagine, how about the lives of those who have physical deformities, maybe facial deformities? These days in London, we even get a lot of acid attacks. They should still have opportunities, even if they're physically deformed. So I think we need to change our misconception. I mean, we need to change our attitude. Disability is not cursed by a sin. I wish I could scream that, or a curse. Please, those who message me saying that I should take my children to Joshua, this is the reason why I did not reply your message. Because if I do, oh gosh, let me not say anything about that. I just chose to ignore those messages. I chose to ignore it. So this Facebook Live discussion is something that's been on my mind. And I'm thinking to myself, I have to say this. I have to talk about this. Please. And I've spoken to countless families who said they've been treated like a plague just because someone in their family has a disability. Please, 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 please. please. So there's also something else. A disabled person is often blamed for lack of faith. That's not true. I mean, that's a misconception. I don't want to go on boasting about our Christian exploits, but I tell you that we had so much faith. I had so much in my head about the Hebrew women and perfection and all that, and I still had a child with special needs. Some of the most amazing Christians I have met in my life are people who have special needs. There's a young lady I admire so much. Her name is Faith. It's coincident that her name is Faith. She is so, so amazing prayer-wise. She's a prayer warrior and she has special needs. You cannot tell me you cannot tell me she doesn't have faith. Please, let us just stop that. Is this self-righteousness thing? You're trying to feel like you're above someone who has a disability. Let's stop it, please. Man, we tend to look at the outward, but the Lord looks at the inward, at the heart. The Lord looks at the heart. And that's from 1 Samuel 16, verse 17. So we are all created in God's image. Many of us learned that along our Christian journey. We always say that, but have we ever considered that this also includes, that was why I wrote all in capital letters. This also includes people who are disabled. They were created in God's image just like you and I. Why do we have to think in the church? Why do we have to think they have to be the only ones that you're forced to go out, that they have to be the only ones that you have to impose deliverance or whatever on? The deepest need of a person with a disability is the same need, is the same as everybody else. They need love, they need acceptance. That's all. Love, love, love. And I think if I'm not able to go into Pastor Sunday's message, you should be able to get these from now, from what I'm saying. The conclusion of his message, the message Pastor Sunday preached about disability and barrenness, is love, love, love. You who doesn't have a disability, you need love. Someone who has a disability also needs love. We're not different. A disability ministry doesn't require a degree in special education. If you're a church leader listening to me right now, a pastor, a minister, reverend, you don't need to have a degree in special education. Your Sunday school teachers don't need a degree in special education to be able to create a disability ministry. Okay? People with disability, this is another misconception. People with disability will be a burden on your church and will not add any value. This is another misconception. People with disabilities, they are not a burden on your church and they will add value. So this is a misconception. So I've already spoken about this subject. So if you're just joining us right now or watching on a replay, I feel that there's a need to educate and help the church because there are too many misconceptions and inaccurate perceptions regarding disability in our own faith community. I'm not talking about just one church. I'm talking about many churches. Many churches, even though recently I've been opportuned to be a part of a church that has a fantastic special needs ministry, but this is not common at all. This is not common. Jesus called us to love our neighbors as ourselves. I shook my head when I got those messages about TB Joshua because I felt that these individuals do not have love. They are pointing out to me that they think my daughter has something wrong with her. Some of the most awkward questions I've been asked when I meet people, some of the most awkward is what's wrong with her or what's wrong with him in the case of my son. Nothing is wrong with her, nothing is wrong with him. Why do we have to use that word wrong? It's all about your perception. This physical body is packaging. We're all made in the likeness of God. So let's learn to love our neighbors as ourselves, no matter what packaging they come in. Even if they don't look like you, even if they don't look perfect in your eyes, we need to love them. So instead of simply praying for physical healing, let us pray to God to open our hearts and our eyes to our own disability attitudes. I have shared this testimony before when I shared my birth story. That for the first 2 years of my daughter's after she was born, I initially thought perhaps we need to heal her, perhaps we need to cure something. But God opened my eyes and I realized that I was the one that needed healing. I needed healing for God to open my eyes, my heart to my own disability attitude. What I should be figuring out is how to do life together. And since that day, my husband and I decided that we will accept our daughter, our son, just the way God gave them to us. Everything changed. Everything changed. My happiness is completely from within. My happiness completely from within. I found that life became a lot more enjoyable. And I want you, if you have a child with special needs as well, because this is not just about talking about the church, we need to also deal with ourselves as well. We need to, when you're pointing fingers at your child and saying, God, that child, heal that child, there's something wrong with that child, you also need to ask God to heal you first. You need to tell God to heal you first, because if God heals you, God will open your heart to be able to love unconditionally. To be able to love unconditionally, we should be celebrating individuals with special needs. We should be loving them unconditionally. Let's not forget that children with disabilities are fully human, they are valuable, and they are fearfully and wonderfully made. The best way to relate with someone with a disability is to get to know him or her. I always say to people, they won't bite you, just go and talk to them. Families impacted by disability often feel isolated. Let us make church a place where they feel they can belong to. I mentioned attitude, our language as well. We need to alter our language to be able to lift others up. Some of us, the way we talk to people who are in a wheelchair, just because height-wise they're lower than us, we just look down on them. That is not what God expects from us. We need to alter our language. We need to lift other people up. It doesn't matter if they have disabilities or not. So we need to change our mindset. So, some of the things we can do as well to change our attitudes: children with special needs, treat them the same way you would treat typical neurotypical children of the same age. A lot of people make that mistake. Even adults with special needs, you treat them as if they are babies. You forget that the same blood that flows through the vein of a 30-year-old woman flows through the veins of a 30-year-old woman who has special needs. I sat down beside an elderly, well, I would say elderly, she's probably in her 40s or something. She's not even elderly, she's still young. She's got special needs. And I don't think she knows that I've got a daughter with Down syndrome. In a way, I'm always attracted to individuals who have Down syndrome, because my daughter has Down syndrome. And then I was just talking to her, and then she was just talking to me about her nails. She's like, I just had my nails done, very sassy, very fashionable. She was just chatting with me and just talking to me, regular girly stuff, talking about her nails. And she was talking to me about her boyfriend. The same way you have emotions as an adult, the same way they will have emotions. So we have to stop treating individuals with special needs different. Children with disabilities have to be kept in their age-appropriate group. That goes for Sunday school. You cannot put a 12-year-old boy who has special needs with 2-year-olds, even if his mental capacity is that of a 2-year-old. You shouldn't do that. So we need to treat people with disabilities with dignity and respect. So how can we make our church to be a lot more inclusive? We have to be intentional. We have to encourage and enable people who are disabled to contribute to church life. So we also have to, if that's possible, we need to have a champion, someone to champion issues on disability and the church. Let's move on. Let's move on from welcoming disabled people as an act of grace and see them as a complete people. Let's see them as complete people, not like people who we think are flawed. It's very easy to feel very alone when church is hard to access and people feel that they want to fix disabled people. Mental illness is also another form of disability as well. It's not a respecter of age, gender, race, or education. People with mental illness need to be included in our church. The church role is to heal and not to cure. So this is probably a message to a pastor who basically said to me one day, he met us after the service in the Capital and said, there's a powerful man of God, is coming. You need to bring your daughter, he's going to, I didn't ask for a cure from him. I don't understand. I just don't understand. When you see people in church, even if they're in a wheelchair or crutches or anything, they have a fit, and some disabilities announce themselves. They do. I always say that my daughter, people just, even though you don't want the attention, you get it. Even if you see them in your church, it doesn't mean that they have come for a cure. They also want to be watered by the message, by the sermon, like you. They also want to enjoy the gathering of the saints, like you. The church needs to examine itself on disability issues. Otherwise, more and more people will leave. And this is really, really sad. This is something that affects my family as well. I was having a chat when we relocated with some families, and a lot of them said to me that, well, families who have children with special needs, they said to me that they just don't feel the church is for them. They can't fit in. And that doesn't sound good. Why do we have to fit in? Even our fingers are not equal. We don't all have to we don't all have to look the same or act the same way. That child in your church who makes so-called noise during the sermon might actually be praising God as well. Everybody has gifts to give. Everybody has gifts to give. The barriers in the society are so great. For us, for families like ours, it can feel like we're climbing an unclimbable wall. Honestly, the church needs to acknowledge its contribution to our general social oppression. Failure to recognize that people who are disabled are present in our congregation means that we fail them. This goes to the leaders and everybody. If we continually ignore people that are disabled, if we don't acknowledge them, we are failing them. Jesus saw all people as bearers of the image of God and desired to share his kingdom with everyone, especially whom society deemed unworthy. There is this thing that if you've been prayed for, if the expected results, doesn't happen, you blame a disabled person for having no faith. Even today, in a group, someone still said, if you do not receive healing after prayer, it means you don't have faith. We judge. And there is this, I don't want to call it ableism in the church. You have the Bible, you have to be able to read it. It feels as if the church has been sort of like set up for the able. It feels as if you have to be able to talk. How about people who cannot talk? It feels as if you have to be able to interpret yourself intellectually. Have we considered people who have intellectual disabilities? Have we actually considered them? I think if we make an effort and change our attitudes towards people who are disabled, It's a symbiotic relationship. And symbiosis is when there is a relationship and both parties actually benefit. People with disabilities, they need the church. They don't want to be locked at home. I know that my children, I'm their voice. Myself and their dad and my husband, we are their voice. We can see through them. We know that they love going to church. We know that they love the Sunday school. They need the church. But you know what? The church also needs people with disabilities. The church should be a place where parents of children with intellectual disabilities can feel free to attend without feeling apologetic or without being stared at. Staring is one of the things that we do. I'm not talking about friendly stares. You know those, what are you doing here, Seth? You know those kind of stares. Let me tell you something. I don't know if other people who have children with special needs can also relate to this. When you're a parent to a little, not so little one with disability, you're a lot more sensitive. People don't have to tell you you're not welcome somewhere. Before you know, you already know. I don't have to step in somewhere. You just know if your kids are welcome there or not. Don't give them this dirty look, you know. Don't, you know, I think, I once read an article where a parent who has a child with special needs, she said, going to church can feel as if you are naked. It can feel as if you're attending church naked. When people look at you, it's almost as if all your flaws are there for the whole world to see. That child will not necessarily keep quiet during the sermon. The child might decide to want to scream or run to the front. And we need to not just tolerate them, we need to include them. One's mental, physical, and sensory condition is neither help nor hindrance in relationship to God. Attitudes of those in the Christian community being a barrier to inclusion. It can be a barrier attitude. I'm sure a lot of you thought my recommendation for inclusion would just be about buildings or all these sort of things. It's more than a wheelchair ramp. It's more than a special cap. Those things are also important, but it's all about our attitudes. Let's open our hearts. Closed hearts of people in the congregation. This is not just to the pastors, to everybody. Close hearts people in the congregation who don't want to interact. Some of you don't want your children to talk to or even touch a disabled person. Disabilities are not contagious. Your child will not become disabled by talking or interacting or being friendly with another child with a disability. We need to change our attitude. Well, in terms of accessibility, many old churches, Anglican, Baptist, some of these old churches that were built a long time ago, they're not very, very accessible. They're not very accessible. So we need to think about accessibility. Pastors need to be educated on so that if they are educated on disability, they can also educate their congregation. When my daughter, not just my daughter, my son, when I feel that they are not welcomed into the church community, the rest of the family gets the same message. So whatever you do to my daughter or my son in the church, you're doing that to me, you're doing that to my husband. I mentioned that we've been through some church events where we basically let their crying. That shouldn't happen. That is not just. There is no theological distinction between a person with a disability and a person without a disability. Both of them are sinners in need of salvation. Both uniquely belong to the body of Christ. Everybody belongs to the body of Christ. Just the same way you think you have a right to be in church, they also have a right to be in church. Let's not even make it about human rights. let's talk about, let's talk about God. All of us, we're all sinners in need of salvation. Why do we feel we need to exclude people who have disabilities due to our attitudes? You don't have to verbally say that. It's about changing our attitudes. The willingness of Christian leadership to regard disability inclusion as a priority need. This is very important. Don't see it as charity. It's not about charity. When you do that to your members or to your church congregation who have the disability, it's a priority need. So wheelchair ramps are also important. Braille for people who are blind. We need to think about them. They also want to read the Bible as well. People who have hearing impairment, we need to think about loops, things to be able to help them to be able to access the church. The list is actually endless. But I have come to the end of my discussion, and I was very determined not to cry. Just like I said, this is something that's come from within my heart. This is something that affects me. So that's the reason why I can give you a proper dissection of the topic. This is not an abstract discussion. This is a real discussion. And I really, really appreciate if you can leave your comment. For those that are watching on a replay, please leave a comment and please share. You just don't know. Somebody somewhere might just be waiting to hear this, So, because for us, our disability, when I'm saying it's not, my daughter, my son's disability is also mine as well. It is long-term, So when you think about it, this particular issue about inclusiveness in church, it needs to be dealt with. We cannot be wishing people with disabilities away. Don't be praying them out of the church. We need to welcome. We need to be inclusive. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm very sure I certainly spent more than 30 minutes. There's certainly more I would love to talk about, but I have to end here. Maybe sometime next month. I don't know, but maybe I'll be able to have a part 2 of the discussion. Who knows? I think it all depends on the questions and all that. But I think this discussion has been very, very sort of robust. I really, really took my time thinking about all we've been through. And I really want to get this out there. I'm hoping this discussion as well can also give hope to that family, that Christian family who have decided that church is no longer for them. If you desire to be in the church like every other believer, you have a right to be there. Please don't give up. I want to tell you that right now, we attend a church with a fantastic special needs ministry. And I want to tell you that you can also find that. In actual fact, if your church is not inclusive, it is very possible it can be inclusive. So anyway, thank you so much and have a good night.